Want to add a clean professional look to your landscape? In today's video, I'll be showing you how to make this DIY tree ring using retaining wall bricks. It's a great weekend project, even for beginners, so let's dive right in. The very first thing we need to do before we go hunting for supplies is figure out how large of a circle you want around your tree ring. I'll be talking you through the example that I've done with my own tree, which has a pretty large canopy, and I intentionally wanted a pretty large ring because I'm planning to put a cut flower garden in that area. So my tree ring has a diameter of about 10 feet, which means a radius of about 5 feet. In a previous video I made, I planned out my very first cut flower garden, and I started those flowers from seed. Now they've been sitting in seed starting cells while I prepped my area to get ready for them. Now originally, if any of you watched that video, you'll remember I had kind of an awkward plan for where I was going to put the cut flower garden. It was going to be on the far side of my fence, looking out from my lanai, and it was going to be a rectangle on the outside of the fence. However, I talked to my husband, and sometimes he has great design ideas, and he suggested the tree ring approach. So that's what prompted me to make this tree ring. Now, when you go to one of your big box stores like Home Depot or Lowe's, you'll see an entire section in the outdoor garden area for things like pavers and retaining wall bricks. And so what I've opted to do is choose the retaining wall brick. These have a shape that works really well for curves, much better than a rectangular paver. So what I've used in this project is the brand Old Castle and the Mini Beltis retaining wall brick. It's a nice aged terracotta color. There are additional options that you can look at for different colors and styles of retaining wall bricks. Let's talk through the supplies you're going to need, and then we'll calculate how much you need of each one. I'm going to show you exactly how to calculate it so you can change the numbers based on the size of your own tree ring. You're going to need retaining wall bricks, paver base, leveling sand, construction adhesive, and as far as tools, you're going to need a shovel, a mason chisel, a level, and a caulk gun. Now let's talk through how you can calculate how much of each one you need, and then I'll show you the prices of those as well. To calculate how many pavers you need, you're going to do 3 steps. The first step is calculate the circumference of the circle. For me, my radius is 5 feet, so that's going to be 31.4 feet in circumference, which translates to 377 inches. Step 2 is calculating the number of pavers per level. That's circumference divided by paver length. The paver that I chose is 8 inches in length, so I'm doing 377 inches in circumference divided by 8 inches in paver length, and that gives me 47 pavers per level. Step 3 is to calculate the total number of pavers. For me, I want to do 3 levels of pavers to give a good height in my retaining wall, and so that's 47 pavers per row times 3 rows is 141 pavers. So I bought 141 pavers plus some extras just in case. Next, we need to calculate how many bags of paver base. Paver base is almost like a gravel, and it's the first step that goes in the ring after we clear it out with a shovel. To calculate how many bags of paver base you need, there's 2 steps. Step 1, calculate the volume of coverage. The volume of coverage is the circumference of that circle times the paver width plus a margin times your desired depth. For me, the volume of coverage is 377 inches in circumference times the paver width plus a margin, which for me, the paver width is 4 inches and the margin is 1 inch on each side that I'm going to add, multiplied by 1 inch of depth. In my example, the volume of coverage is 2,262 cubic inches. Step 2 is to divide the volume of coverage by the coverage of each bag. Now we know from the product listing on Home Depot's website that one bag covers 0.5 cubic feet or 864 cubic inches. So the number of bags is the volume of coverage that we calculated in step 1 divided by the coverage of each bag. For me, the number of bags is 2.6, but really we can't purchase 2.6 bags of paver base, so I'm going to buy 3 bags of paver base. The next thing we need to figure out is how many bags of leveling sand to use. Leveling sand goes directly on top of the paver base, and it helps keep those stones in place and helps you manipulate the stones so you can make them level with each other. The calculation for figuring out how many bags of leveling sand you need is exactly the same as the calculation for how many bags of paver base. So I won't go through the whole calculation, but I want to point out that many people will opt for a deeper depth of leveling sand. So instead of going with 1 inch of depth, I chose to do 2 inches of depth, which doubles how many bags I need. So I needed 6 bags of leveling sand for this project. Now for the construction adhesive, I won't bore you with some kind of calculation to figure out how much of that to buy, but I will tell you that I bought 2 and it wasn't enough, so I went back to the store for 2 more, and 4 was the final answer for me. Now let me walk you through step by step exactly how I did this project. So my husband and I went to Home Depot to pick up all of the supplies, and we were able to fit all of the supplies in the back of my Suburban. However, my tree ring that I wanted to work on is in the backyard. So when we got home, we actually popped the trunk of the Suburban, loaded a lot of the bricks onto the back of my golf cart, and I drove it to the backyard. Then what you're going to want to do is lay out the bricks in the approximate location where they're going to be. So I laid out the first layer of bricks, measuring from the tree trunk out to the corner of the retaining bricks. And I ended up measuring 46 inches from the trunk of the tree to each inside corner of the retaining blocks. Now I know I said earlier the radius I was shooting for was 5 feet, but I can't really measure from the center of the tree, right? So I just chose to measure from the outside of the tree, and I approximated my line. But I did want it to be a really nice circle, so I measured each and every brick. Then once you have that outline of your first layer, you're going to use your shovel and start digging out the channel for your pavers. I started just outside of the brick, shooting for about 1 to 2 inches outside of the brick, and then I cleared the dirt from underneath. I continued this all the way around the circle. Now, depending on what you want to do with the interior part of your retaining wall, I went through and used my hand cultivator to pull all of the weeds and all of the grass out of that area, since my plan is to cover it with cardboard, compost, and garden soil and plant a cut flower garden. And then I went back through with my shovel to make sure I had a really nice defined line and I had some depth. You're going to want to dig at least 3 to 4 inches of depth in the circle, and that's going to give you the space for that 1 inch of depth of the paver base, that 2 inches of depth for the leveling sand, and then the bricks to go on top of that. Then I opened up the bags of paver base and just poured them directly in there, and I spread them out roughly. Now it's time to start laying your retaining wall bricks. When it comes to laying the bricks, you're going to want to lay them one at a time very carefully. What I did here was pour out 1 bag of leveling sand, choose 1 paver to start with, and I measured the 2 inner corners of that retaining wall brick to be exactly 46 inches away from my tree trunk. Then I used a level to make sure it was level in 2 directions. You can see those directions on the screen here. And then I put more leveling sand around it to make sure that that paver was secure. Then I added more leveling sand and I moved on to an additional retaining wall brick, making sure that that brick was level with the previous brick. Now the first layer is definitely the hardest and definitely the slowest. When it came to the second level, it was time to open up that construction adhesive. So I squeezed it out onto the bottom of that top brick and laid it so that it was alternating with the seams that were on the first layer. Now, of course, it's really hard to get the calculations just right to the point where you don't have any gaps to fill at the end. So I had a gap, and this is the method that I used to fill it. I took 1 retaining wall brick and I marked the space with a Sharpie, and then I actually had my husband do the chisel because I tried several times and ended up chipping the brick. So I got him to finally do it, and he was able to chip off a piece of that stone that filled that gap perfectly, and we put the construction adhesive on that brick and put it in place. Now that construction adhesive takes 24 hours to cure, so I would recommend waiting to do anything else with the interior portion of that tree ring until it's fully cured. Let's not forget to talk about how much this project costs. The total supply cost for this project is $330. Tool cost for this project is $72. Let's take a look at the final product and let me know in the comments what you think. Follow along for my next upcoming video in which I fill that raised bed with soil and cut flowers.